At first, this looked like another heartbreaking cheating scandal. A successful husband abandons his pregnant wife for a younger mistress while she mourns her mother's death. But as I investigated deeper, the story became darker. Hidden inheritances, secret companies, a fortune nobody knew existed. The woman everyone pitied was quietly becoming one of the richest heirs in the country. And while her enemies celebrated too early, she was preparing a comeback so devastating that it would change all of their lives forever.
Imagine this. You are bleeding out in the snow. Your newborn is getting cold in your arms. Your husband's family just pushed you down stone steps in a blizzard. They called me worthless, like I was trash. They had no idea that in just 4 hours, I was getting $2.3 billion. I would make them all pay. My name is Emma Harrington, and this is my real-life story. This is how I went from the brink of death to taking down their entire empire. It is a story about a family of tyrants who learned one thing the hard way. Never discard the woman you believe is weak. For 3 years, they shamed me. They shared my pain with their 500,000 followers. They even used a corrupt judge to steal my child. Their money and power made them think they were gods. They were dead wrong. When I walked into that meeting 8 weeks later, I was brand new. I had platinum blonde hair, a billion-dollar business behind me, and 4 million viewers watching. The shock on their faces when they knew who I was, that one look made up for all my suffering. But what came next became a famous story. They signed a legal document without checking the details. It was a trick they had used on me countless times. Life has a funny way of evening the score. You will want to hear the end of this story. The surprise in the courtroom when the Federal Bureau of Investigation arrived, and their final fates. You cannot predict what happens. If you have ever felt worthless or been thrown away, this story is for you. But before we start, I need to ask you for something. If you think justice needs to be done, please hit the like button. Let me know in the comments what you would do in my shoes. Please subscribe, because next week's story is even wilder. You really do not want to miss it. But before I start this insane story, you need to know one thing. This is about more than revenge. It is about finding your strength when everyone tells you that you are weak. It is about a woman they treated like nothing who chose to be unbreakable. If you have ever been made to feel small or worthless, then you know this feeling. This story proves that pain is not your final chapter. Sometimes it reshapes you into someone powerful. Let's go back to where it all started. It was February 14th, Valentine's Day, the day my world fell apart. They pulled me across the freezing marble floor. My 3-day-old baby was screaming in my arms. Then they threw us down the stone stairs into the storm. What they did not know was that a $2.3 billion fortune was just 4 hours away. And I planned to use every penny to make them suffer. I am Emma Harrington. This is how I went from dying in the snow to taking down an entire family. You have to hear the ending. The video of that boardroom reveal got millions of views. It was the last chess move that took them down for good. You need to witness the moment the 4 million people saw them beg me for forgiveness. Let's rewind to the beginning of this horror. 3 days earlier, I was in a room at Mercy General Hospital. My body was recovering from an emergency C-section. The pain was awful. A burning line stretched across my stomach, making each breath a struggle. But that physical agony was small compared to the hollowness in my soul. My husband, Michael, had been gone for 52 hours. Not one visit. I counted every hour. The nurses looked at me with such pity. I heard them whispering outside my door when they thought I was asleep. I told myself he was just busy with his job. I kept hoping he would appear in the doorway at any moment. It hurts to remember how foolish I was. It was Valentine's Day, February 14th. The whole situation felt like a twisted joke. My daughter, Grace, was asleep in her little bed next to mine. Her perfect face had a slight yellow color from jaundice. The doctor said it was common, and I should not worry. But looking at her made my stomach twist with fear. She was so small and fragile. She was completely flawless, and her father had not even come to meet her. I had intravenous lines in both arms and a catheter. The medicine they gave me every 4 hours barely touched the pain. It was a solid 7 out of 10. Moving at all was agony. At about 11 that night, my best friend, Rebecca, slipped in. She was a nurse in the intensive care unit downstairs and came to see me on her breaks. "Emma, honey?" Rebecca whispered. Her voice sounded tight and forced. She looked scared for me, not just sorry for me. "I have to show you this. Please, just breathe. It is just better if you see it from me first." She handed me her phone. The Instagram app was open. I could only stare at the screen, unable to move. In that cold, white hospital room, my entire world broke apart. It was Michael's account. He had put up a picture of himself with another woman. She was beautiful, glowing, and clearly pregnant. Her hand rested on her big belly in that classic mother-to-be pose. They were at a fancy restaurant I had always wanted to visit. He had never taken me there. The caption said, "With my real family, living my real life at last. A new, honest start." He posted it 6 hours ago. It already had 47,000 likes. The comments were a mix of happy wishes and pure confusion. "Wait, are not you married?" someone wrote. "Who is she?" another asked. But most of the replies were heart emojis, celebrating his honesty. I felt a fist close around my heart and squeeze. "Emma," Rebecca said softly, "it was even worse than that. He was telling people at the hospital that I had forced him to marry me. He said he was now free to be with his true love. We were married for 3 years. For 3 years, I gave my all to be a perfect wife. I just wanted to be enough for him and for his family. I gave him 3 years of my life and my complete trust, and he was with another woman the entire time." My phone started vibrating on the table next to me. The number was unfamiliar. I was too broken to even think about answering. My chest hurt too much to talk, so I ignored the call. I hardly saw the name on the screen. W. Harrington, private. I found out much later that was my grandfather calling me at 11:47 that night. He wanted to arrange our very first meeting. I have to wonder how different things would be if I had answered. Just then, Dr. Morrison came in with my release papers. She was the doctor who had delivered Grace. She was a kind, older woman with a gentle voice and a very concerned look. "Mrs. Sterling," she said, her voice quiet and careful, "I need to talk to you about something. Our social services department has some worries. Your husband has not been here to visit, and there are some—" The door suddenly flew open and slammed hard against the wall. My mother-in-law, Victoria Sterling, marched in. Her coat was designer and probably cost more than my car. She carried a Hermes bag, and her eyes were filled with fury. Michael's father, Jonathan, was right behind her. His expensive suit just screamed money and control. Then came Madison, Michael's sister. She already had her phone out and was filming everything. The last person in the room was Alexis, the woman from the Instagram picture. She had a superior smirk on her face. She put a hand on her pregnant belly like it was a prize she had won. Dr. Morrison stepped in front of them. "I'm sorry, but visiting hours are over, and Mrs. Victoria cut her off with a wave of her hand. "We are the family. We have a right to be here." She then shoved a folder at Dr. Morrison. "These papers are from Child Protective Services. My daughter-in-law is not mentally well. She is an unfit mother. We are here for our granddaughter's safety." I just stared at them, completely lost. My mind could not make sense of it all. Child Protective Services? Official papers? Nothing added up. The folder was full of fake documents. They had created false claims that I had postpartum psychosis. It even had a forged psychiatric report, signed by Dr. Gerald Rothman, the family's personal doctor. The report said my parental rights should be taken away until I had a full mental check. Dr. Morrison's hands shook as she looked over the documents. I could see the conflict in her face. She knew it was a terrible injustice, but she was helpless against them. The Sterling family had recently donated a large amount of money to the hospital, which gave them incredible power. Victoria walked up to my bed. Her voice was pure poison. "This is the last time you will ruin my son's life. Your pathetic little show ends right now. Huh? I was weak and confused. The pain medicine made my thoughts foggy. What are you talking about? I was able to whisper. While I held my newborn daughter, Alexis let out a mean, sharp laugh. She walked to my hospital bed and took a folder from her purse. She said, "That baby is not his. We did a DNA test." Alexis showed me what appeared to be a fake lab report. The paper claimed the chance of my husband being the father was 0%. My head was spinning. How was that possible? I had been in the hospital the entire time. You cannot test a baby's DNA without the mother's consent. But there it was, a document that looked official, right in front of me. At that moment, Madison started a live video on Instagram. I saw my own face on her screen. I looked so pale and defeated in my hospital gown. Madison's voice was cheerful, but full of venom. "Hello, everyone," she said. "You all wanted to know about my brother's greedy wife. Well, here is the real story, coming to you live. She is trying to trap him with a baby that is not even his." I could only watch in horror as the cruel comments flooded in. "Oh my goodness, is this real? She looks so pitiful. Your brother can do so much better." 500,000 of their followers were watching my most humiliating moment unfold. Victoria leaned over, her face just inches from mine. "Let me tell you who you are, Emma. You are an absolute joke. You are nothing more than a bet my son made with his friends in college for $100,000. The bet was to see if he could marry the poorest girl at their school and put up with her for 3 years. She then pulled out her phone and played a video. It was Michael, obviously drunk at his bachelor party 4 years earlier. He was laughing with 7 of his friends. One of them said, "Man, 3 years with some girl from the slums for $100,000. That is the easiest money I have ever heard of." Michael replied, "I will just close my eyes and think of someone else when I am with her." The sound of their cruel laughter filled the hospital room. In that one instant, my whole world fell apart. 3 years. Every "I love you," every anniversary was all a lie. All my work to be accepted into his world, to be worthy of the Sterlings, was for nothing. It was all just a sick game. Then Madison's eyes fell on my wrist. She saw the simple silver bracelet with a small charm that belonged to my mother. It was the only memory I had of her. "Oh, what is that ugly thing?" Madison said with a sneer. "Your precious little family treasure." She reached out to rip it off my wrist. I pulled my hand back fast, and a sharp pain from my surgery shot through my stomach. "Do not touch that. It is all I have of my mom." Victoria then slapped me hard across the face. The loud crack echoed in the quiet room. Dr. Morrison gasped and said, "That is assault. I am calling security." Jonathan's voice was as cold as ice. He said, "We are the security here. This is Harrington Memorial Hospital. My family paid for this entire wing. You can call whoever you want." The awful truth was that the hospital was named after my very own grandfather. They were threatening me in a place that my family had built. Just then, Rebecca ran into the room. She shouted, "What in the world is going on in here?" When the hospital security guards arrived, they were clearly torn. They knew Jonathan was a powerful donor, a man with great influence. They stood there, frozen, not sure what to do. Victoria then shoved a thick stack of divorce papers against my chest. She said, "Sign these right now, or Child Protective Services will take your daughter in the morning." She continued, "We have doctors ready to say that you are not mentally stable. You will lose her forever." The pain medication was making me feel dizzy. Every small movement caused a new wave of pain from my C-section cut. The room felt like it was spinning around me. "Please," I pleaded, my voice cracking as tears ran down my cheeks. "Just do not take my baby away from me." My hand was shaking so badly that I could barely hold the pen. But I signed the papers. Alexis leaned in very close to me. I could feel her warm breath on my cheek as she whispered, "Did you really think someone like you could ever keep a sterling child? You are nothing. You will always be nothing." Victoria gave a cold, winning smile. She said, "You are discharged. Come to the mansion tomorrow to get your trash." After that, you will vanish from our lives for good." And then they were gone. I broke down crying, my entire body shaking without control. Rebecca tried to comfort me. She said, "We have to call the police. This is not legal. They forced you." "No," I whispered in return. "They have a team of lawyers and endless money. I do not have anything. I just want my baby to be safe." That is when Dr. Morrison quietly took out her own phone. I did not notice that she had been recording the whole thing. I had no clue that she was a special reporter who took her duties very seriously. "I am recording all of this," she said with a calm voice. "What they are doing is a type of abuse." I was too heartbroken to truly understand what she was saying. "It will not make a difference," I thought to myself. "People like them always win." But that recording was about to completely change my life. I just did not realize it yet. The next morning, on February 15th, I used an app to get a car to the Sterling Mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. Michael always handled our money, so I did not have enough for my own car. My baby Grace was safely in a car seat the hospital gave me. She was covered in a single, thin blanket. She seemed so small and helpless. She was only 3 days old, and her life had already become a total nightmare. The mansion appeared before us. It was a giant Georgian-style house that showed off generations of wealth in every detail. In the 3 years I had been there, it never once felt like my home. My key still worked in the lock, and I went inside through the huge front doors. The staff I thought were my friends would not even look at me. A couple of them were actually smiling. All my possessions were stuffed in trash bags and thrown onto the driveway. My hand trembled as I went to what used to be my room. It was never a real bedroom, since Michael and I did not sleep together. They gave me a room in the servants' area, behind the main house. It was a constant reminder that I was an outsider. The room had been completely destroyed. My clothes were soaked, tossed into the garden fountain. They had torn my books apart, leaving pages scattered all over. My mother's treasured photos were nothing but ash in the fireplace. I could still smell the lingering smoke. Her jewelry was gone. A moment later, I saw Madison wearing it in the master bedroom. She had on my mother's pearl necklace, the one thing I cherished most. Madison just laughed and took a picture of herself. "This old piece of junk?" she asked. "It just looks so much better on me. Do not you agree? What I find is mine." Leaving that house brought back a flood of awful memories. I remembered my first Thanksgiving there. Victoria made me serve the meal while her family enjoyed it. She told me, "The help does not eat at the table, my dear." Michael said nothing. In our second year, I wore a simple dress to a charity gala. Victoria told me to stay in the shadows. Jonathan made me work the coat check, while Madison flaunted her very expensive gown. For our third Christmas, their presents cost thousands. Michael handed me a brand new vacuum cleaner. They all thought it was hilarious. Victoria said, "Now you can finally be useful." It was 3 years of carefully planned, soul-crushing humiliation. I packed the few things that they hadn't ruined into one small bag. Grace started a fuss. She was hungry, and her diaper was wet, but I had no place to take her. As I got to the front door, Victoria's voice crackled through the intercom. "Emma dear," she called out, "could you please come to the grand hall? We are all waiting for you." A cold knot of dread formed deep in my stomach. The grand hall was enormous, with marble floors that I had spent many hours polishing. A crystal chandelier, worth a small fortune, hung high above. The entire Sterling family was gathered, sitting like a panel of judges. Victoria was in the center, like a queen on her throne, with Jonathan next to her. Madison was on the stairs, already filming with her smartphone. Michael was leaning against a distant wall, refusing to meet my eyes. Alexis clung to Michael's arm, a cruel smile on her face. 4 huge security guards I had never seen before stood near the door. Victoria's voice was as cold as the floor beneath me. She said, "Before you go, you will get down on your knees and apologize. You will say you are sorry for wasting 3 years and for trapping my son with your baby." I clutched Grace even closer. "No," I replied. "I am leaving now. Just let me pass." Jonathan's voice was a low growl. You will kneel, or we will phone every shelter in this state. He then said, we will inform them you are a dangerous and unstable mother. Child Protective Services will come looking for you. I will not kneel, I said again. Victoria simply gave a nod to the guards. It all happened in an instant. One guard grabbed both of my arms. I cried out, please, I am holding my baby. You will hurt her. A second guard ripped Grace from my grasp. The pain was sharp and intense. The movement tore the stitches from my C-section. I felt a sudden warmth spreading through my clothes. It was my own blood. Grace let out the heartbreaking scream of a terrified newborn. Madison was streaming everything live on the internet. This is what happens when trashy gold diggers get what they deserve, she told her audience. You are all watching karma in action. Terrible comments began to fill the screen. She had it coming. Throw her out of there. 500,000 people were watching my entire world crumble. The guards started dragging me along the floor. I was still too weak from my surgery to put up a fight. The blood loss was making me feel faint. My shoulder slammed into the sharp corner of a marble column. I heard a terrible popping sound, and a flash of pain shot up my arm. My bracelet snagged on the column, and the main charm snapped right off. A housemaid quickly scooped it up and slipped it into her pocket. At that moment, I had no idea how important that small act was. All I knew was the agony. I was bleeding everywhere, pleading with them to just stop. Alexis simply stood there and laughed. This is just pathetic, Michael, she sneered. Is this really the girl you threw away 3 years for? Michael's voice was completely empty. Just get her out of my home. He showed no trace of shame on his face. They dragged me to the giant front doors and pulled them open. A full-blown blizzard was raging outside. The temperature felt like -5 degrees. The snow was coming down so hard you could not see more than 10 feet ahead. The wind was howling like a monster. They shoved me down the stone steps. I tumbled down all 5 of them. Every single impact was a new wave of pain. My shoulder took the brunt of the fall. I landed in a heap in the snow, turning it red with my blood. They tossed my bag beside me like it was garbage. The few things inside spilled out. My medication, diapers, and one tiny baby outfit. That was everything I owned. A guard then threw my daughter Grace down toward me. I somehow caught her, pulling her close to my body for warmth. Alexis shouted from the doorway, "If you ever come back, we will call the police." Then Victoria's harsh voice sliced through the storm. "This is exactly where garbage belongs." The heavy door slammed shut, and the sound echoed in the quiet. I just sat in the snow, bleeding with a dislocated shoulder. Grace's cries were getting quieter, which filled me with a new kind of terror. My phone was shattered. I had no cash and no coat. I was wearing only thin hospital slippers, which were already soaked through. In that moment, I honestly believed Grace and I were going to die. "I am so sorry, my sweet baby," I whispered, trying to shield her from the cold. "Your mommy tried so hard." And then, Grace went completely silent. That silence sent a wave of pure terror through me. Babies are not supposed to be quiet in the freezing cold. "Please do not go," I begged her tiny, still form. "You are my entire world." My vision began to narrow at the edges. The hypothermia was setting in. My body was beginning to shut down. I closed my eyes, feeling ready to just let go. That is when I saw headlights, cutting through the blizzard. 3 black sport utility vehicles appeared out of the snow. They pulled up right in front of where I was sitting. Their doors opened before the vehicles even came to a complete stop. An older man in a perfect Tom Ford suit stepped out holding an umbrella. At 3:47 in the morning, he looked like a chief executive officer. A man's calm, strong voice said, "Miss Emma Catherine Morgan, thank heavens we found you in time." I could barely form the words. Who are you people?" He knelt down right next to me in the snow, ruining what had to be a $3,000 suit. He did not seem to care in the slightest. "Your grandfather sent me," he explained gently. "We have to get you both to a safe place immediately." Right behind him, A team of paramedics from Harrington Global Medical was rushing toward us. They carried heated blankets and were loaded with medical gear. Grandfather? I whispered in confusion. My mother's father passed away before I was even born. I do not have a... Yes, you do, he interrupted softly. His name is William James Harrington, and you are being taken to the Harrington Medical Center right now. Your daughter is about 10 minutes away from critical hypothermia. The medical team moved with incredible speed and skill. They wrapped both me and Grace in the special heated blankets. They started an intravenous line in my arm to treat my dehydration and placed a tiny oxygen mask over Grace's mouth and nose. Her breathing had become dangerously shallow. One person carefully supported my injured shoulder, while others applied pressure to my wounds to control the bleeding. In less than a few minutes, we were being lifted into a warm sport utility vehicle. The warmth felt like paradise after being out in the freezing storm. The older man, whose name I later learned was Richard Blackwell, was in the vehicle with us. He was calmly giving orders and coordinating the entire rescue. As we drove quickly through the blizzard, our driver handled the vehicle so smoothly that the storm felt like a minor issue. Richard was speaking on his phone, and his voice was completely steady and clear. Dr. Anderson, our estimated arrival is in 8 minutes. I have a 28-year-old female, 3 days post-C-section. She has active bleeding, a likely shoulder dislocation, and moderate hypothermia. Her 3-day-old infant is in critical condition with severe hypothermia. Please have the neonatal intensive care unit and a full trauma team on standby. A paramedic took my daughter Grace's temperature, 94.5, he announced quietly. We need to bring her core temperature up very, very slowly. A newborn's body should stay between 97 and 99 degrees. If her temperature dropped to 93, her tiny organs would start to shut down. I could only lie there, helpless, watching them work to save my daughter. I was so weak. I had no choice but to trust these strangers who appeared out of a blizzard. We arrived at the Harrington Private Medical Center at 4:15 in the morning. This place was a world away from Mercy General, where Grace was born. This was a hospital built for the extremely wealthy. It had shining marble floors and real paintings on the walls. The rooms looked like suites in a 5-star hotel. Grace was rushed directly to the neonatal intensive care unit. A team of 6 doctors immediately surrounded her. They started warming treatments and attached monitors with practiced skill. As they worked, the chief pediatrician, Dr. Anderson, said, "You arrived just in time. Another 5 minutes could have caused permanent harm." I was taken to a private suite that felt like a room at a luxury resort. The doctors there reset my dislocated shoulder. The procedure was incredibly painful, but necessary. They also had to re-stitch my C-section incision. The medical team started a blood transfusion, gave me IV fluids, and put me on antibiotics. They explained that my injuries and the cold put me at great risk for infection. They finally gave me medicine for the pain, and I felt some relief. I woke up 7 hours later, at 11 in the morning. Sunlight streamed into the room. For a second, I hoped it was all just a nightmare. But then, I saw the bandages on my shoulder and the IV tubes in my arm. A sudden wave of panic washed over me. "Grace, where's my baby?" Just then, Dr. Morrison, the woman who delivered Grace at Mercy General, walked in. "Emma, try to stay calm," she said gently. "Grace is stable. She is in the intensive care unit, and they are watching her constantly. She will be fine." "What are you doing here?" I asked, completely confused. "Mr. Blackwell called me and explained what happened," she replied. "I quit my job at Mercy General this morning. I refused to work for a system that would let that happen to a patient." The next person to enter was my friend Rebecca. She hurried to my bedside and gave me a soft, tearful hug. "Oh, Emma, I was terrified," she cried. "You were not answering your phone, so I drove to the Sterling mansion. I saw the bloodstains on the snow. I thought the worst had happened." "I am all right," I reassured her. "We are both safe now." At that moment, Richard Blackwell came in, holding a leather folder. "Ladies, I need to speak with Emma alone, he stated. This matter is highly confidential. Rebecca and Dr. Morrison left the room, their faces still full of worry. Richard pulled a chair close to my bed. A nurse then wheeled Grace into the room in a mobile incubator. She was still hooked up to machines, but she looked so peaceful. The sight of my daughter, alive and safe, made me start crying all over again. Emma, Richard began, your mother's name was Catherine Harrington. Before she took the name Catherine Morgan, your grandfather was William James Harrington. He was the founder and chief executive officer of Harrington Global Industries. He handed me a photo of an older man who had kind eyes but a powerful look. I had never seen his face before. My mother never mentioned her family. She always told me they were gone. Richard then told me their story. My mother left her home at 19 after a terrible fight with her father. The fight was about my father, James Morgan. William believed James was only interested in her fortune. It turned out he was right. But my mother was fiercely independent and proud. She walked away without a single cent. She changed her last name, moved to Ohio, and worked 3 jobs to raise me by herself. After my father left us, when I was just 2, her pride kept her from ever calling her father, and his pride kept him from ever saying he was sorry. They were 2 stubborn people who cared for each other deeply, but their pride pushed them apart. This continued until my mother died in a car crash 5 years ago. William was absolutely devastated. He had been secretly watching over her for years from a distance, but he never reached out. After her death, he started looking for me. Richard explained, he found you 2 years ago, right after you married Michael Sterling. I felt like all the air had been forced from my lungs. For the last 2 years, William has been protecting you. He hired a private security detail to follow you and installed cameras all around the Sterling estate. He knew about everything they were doing to you. Richard then showed me the videos. I watched clips of Victoria making me serve drinks at her parties, as if I were a servant. I saw Jonathan making me do hard labor for free. I listened to Madison's endless insults and saw that Michael did absolutely nothing to stop any of it. Why did he not do anything to help me? I asked, my voice breaking. Richard explained that William wanted to intervene more than anything, but his lawyers, including Richard himself, told him to be patient. They needed to build a perfect legal case for the inheritance. This was to prevent the Sterlings from ever claiming I married Michael, because I knew I had money. If they could prove that, they might have been able to contest the will. They were creating a trust to protect you from any legal battles. All this time, the plan was for William to meet you on February 15th, the day after your baby was born, which is today. The call from the private number last night, I whispered. Richard nodded. That was William. He was on a flight from London. He was calling to tell you he would be at the hospital this morning to finally meet you. For the first time, Richard's own voice trembled with emotion. His plane landed at 6 this morning. He got right into his car. I called him to set up a time for your meeting. He asked how you were doing. I had to tell him you had already left the hospital, and that we had no idea where you were. The Global Positioning System tracker showed you were at the Sterling estate. A Global Positioning System tracker? The bracelet, Richard explained. The one that was your mother's? The one you never take off. William had a medical tracking chip placed inside the charm. It is waterproof, has a battery that lasts 5 years, and contains heat sensors. I automatically touched my wrist, but the bracelet was gone. It must have snapped off and fallen in the snow. That is how we found you. At 3 in the morning, the heat sensor sent out an emergency alert. It warned us that your body temperature was dropping to a critical level. I called William immediately to let him know you were in danger. He pulled up the live security camera feed from the Sterling mansion. Richard then showed me the video on his tablet. I saw the entire attack. Madison was live streaming it. I saw them drag me outside and throw me down the stairs. I saw the blood on the snow and my baby Grace, nearly dead. Every single moment had a clear timestamp. William watched that video at 7:05 this morning, sitting in his car. Richard lost his composure. At 7:07, his driver called. William had a major heart attack. The ambulance arrived at 7:21. His time of death was officially 7:07 in the morning. The awful timing was like a punch to the gut. Emma, you need to listen, Richard said, his voice firm again. When they tossed you out at 3 this morning, you were nothing to them. You were poor, helpless, and disposable, just like they always said. But at 7:07, just 4 hours later, you inherited his entire $2.3 billion estate. He went on. They abandoned you in the snow to die with nothing. But as you lay on that frozen ground, you were about to become a billionaire. They never knew. I just stared at him, unable to process it all. Your grandfather saw what they did and gave you the means to destroy them. Richard gave me a thick, heavy envelope. My name was on the front in William's handwriting. I read the letter through my tears. My dearest Emma, it started. If you are reading this, then I am gone. I am so sorry it took me this long to find you. I was on my way to meet you, to apologize for failing your mother, and for allowing that family to treat you so badly. I was so focused on the legal details to protect you. I wanted to guarantee that no one could steal what was rightfully yours. But I should have focused on your well-being first. I saw the security footage this morning. When they threw you and your child into the snow, I knew I had failed. My heart just gave out. But I can still keep you safe. My entire life's work is now yours. The $2.3 billion, the 40 companies, and the land in 18 countries. It is all yours now. I want you to take charge of this empire. Show them the strength that runs in our Harrington blood. Never let them make you feel weak, my grandfather's letter said. Make them pay for every tear. You are not nothing. You are my granddaughter. I clutched the paper, my body shaking with sobs. Next to me, my daughter Grace slept, finally safe. Richard, my grandfather's lawyer, spoke. The trust is active. The estate is yours now. He continued, there is no court, no waiting. As of 8 o'clock this morning, you are the new chairwoman of Harrington Global. The Sterlings have no idea. I looked up, tears streaming down my face, but my eyes felt cold. A hard new feeling grew inside me. I want to know every weakness their company has, I said. For the first time, Richard smiled slightly. That is what your grandfather would have said. The next day, February 16th, I was in a wheelchair in the main conference room. My body was still healing, but my mind was ready. My daughter Grace lay in a stroller beside me. A nurse watched over her. Her skin was a healthy pink now. Richard set down a stack of folders. Each one held a secret about a member of the Sterling family. He began simply. Sterling Industries is about to fall apart. They owed $83 million. He showed me papers proving Jonathan stole $12 million from his employees. Bad deals had lost them another $31 million. They also had business loans of $40 million. Richard said that without a huge amount of cash, they would be bankrupt in 3 months. Just last month, Jonathan tried to get a $75 million government contract through our company. That contract was their only hope for survival. And we were the ones who could approve or deny it. Richard looked at me. The decision is yours. You are the chief executive officer. Then he handed me Victoria's file. It described her personal project, the Sterling-style boutiques. She had 5 stores, all in buildings owned by Harrington Global. Richard pointed out that her leases had to be renewed in only 47 days. She was already behind on her rent by $480,000. But the worst part was that she was hiding money from the government. We had proof of $2.3 million in tax evasion. I asked, "Can we report her?" He replied, "An anonymous tip is ready. I am just waiting for your approval." At that moment, an investigator named James Crawford gave me the file on Madison. It said, Madison Sterling is 32 years old but says she is 26 online. He put her driver's license next to a social media photo. The birth years did not match. She also had many secret plastic surgeries. She had a new nose in 2019 and breast implants in 2020. She also got regular injections. In 2021, She had a major body reshaping surgery. Her modeling contract with the prestige agency had a clear rule against secret surgeries. This meant they could fire her on the spot. I asked, "Who owns the prestige agency?" Richard simply smiled. "As of yesterday, you do. Harrington Global bought the agency 2 weeks ago." Madison had no idea. The next file on the table belonged to Michael. The college bet was saved in a group chat with 8 people. Nobody had deleted the messages. Brad Miller, age 23, wrote, "You will never stay married to that poor girl for 3 years." Michael Sterling wrote back, "I bet you $100,000 I can. It will be the easiest money I ever make," he added. Another person asked, "What if she finds out the truth?" Michael Sterling replied, "She will not. She is too foolish and desperate to ever know." There was also a video. It was a longer version of the one Victoria had shown me. In it, Michael said he would just close his eyes and pretend I was Alexis. Everyone laughed. The investigator also found that Michael had stolen $3.8 million from Sterling Industries. He used the money to fund his lavish life with Alexis. He also said Jonathan knew about the theft but covered it up to protect the family's reputation. The last file was for Alexis Beaumont, but that was not her real name. The investigator said, "Her real name is Alexandra Marie Thompson." He showed me her police photo from California, taken in 2019. She was a con artist with 3 different cases against her. The first case was in 2018. She was engaged to a rich tech executive. She faked a pregnancy, took $400,000, and then vanished. The second case was in 2020. She was engaged to a man named David Collins. She faked another pregnancy and stole $650,000. The third case was in 2021. She was engaged to an executive named Marcus Whitmore. She tried the fake pregnancy trick again, but was caught. A warrant was out for her arrest. She is now wanted for fraud. The pregnancy she claimed with Michael was also fake. We discovered she bought the ultrasound picture online for $200. I asked, "Does Michael know any of this?" The investigator replied, "Not yet." I took a long, slow breath. If I revealed the truth about Alexis now, people would just feel sorry for Michael. They would see him as a victim tricked by a professional criminal. Richard nodded in agreement. He said, "You are learning quickly." We decided to keep the information about Alexis secret for now. We would release it later, when it would cause the most damage. Over the next 8 weeks, I became a different person. The first week was for healing my body and learning about the business. I had therapy for my shoulder and scar. I learned to hold grace in one arm while reading financial reports with the other. Richard taught me how to understand complex business documents. I sat silently in board meetings, watching and learning. In the second week, I became an executive. I took a difficult business course with top leaders. I found every weak spot in Sterling Industries and filled pages with notes. I started asking smart questions that impressed everyone. I gave my first presentation to the board alone. My transformation was happening fast. Week 3 was all about changing my image. I bought expensive clothing from the best designers, my closet filled with power suits and high heels. I dyed my soft brown hair a bold platinum blonde. A makeup artist taught me her tricks, and a coach helped me improve my voice and posture. "Walk in like you own the room," my coach said, "because now you do." Week 4 was about finding my real strength. I started learning Krav Maga for self-defense. I promised myself I would never be a victim again. Richard put me through tough negotiation training. The company lawyers showed me how to legally take apart someone's life. I practiced my serious boardroom look in the mirror until it was perfect. In weeks 5 and 6, we put our plan into action. Harrington Global quietly began buying all the debt owed by Sterling Industries. We bought the debt from 15 different banks. We used a secret company to purchase Madison's modeling agency. A team of accountants was sent to inspect Victoria's stores. All the proof was gathered for the tax service. Week 7 was for setting the final trap. I worked with my team on my boardroom presentation. I made myself watch the security video of the attack, which we recovered from the Sterling house. The maid who took my bracelet was our informant. My assistant paid her $50,000 for the bracelet and a video she had secretly recorded. We started leaking anonymous tips about Madison to gossip websites. We also scheduled the official business meeting with Jonathan. In week 8, my preparations were complete. I practiced my speech over and over in the mirror. My daughter Grace was now 2 months old, healthy and happy with her nannies. I stood tall in my power suit, my hair a perfect shade of blonde. My crimson lipstick looked flawless. I saw a stranger in the mirror, a woman I barely recognized. I whispered to her, "It's time to destroy them." The meeting was set for April 12th. They had no idea a storm was coming for them. On April 2nd, just 10 days before the meeting, Madison was still posting on her Instagram. She was on a trip to Turks and Caicos, funded by her parents. Her caption said, 26 and living my best life. So blessed. All natural, no filter needed. She had 486,000 followers. The comments were full of people calling her perfect. Madison thought she was untouchable. I called her from my old number, one I knew she would remember. She answered laughing, with Alexis and Victoria in the background. "Oh my God, you guys," she said. "The trash is calling. I'm putting it on speaker. Hey, Emma, how's that gutter you live in? Did you and the baby find a nice homeless shelter?" I purposely made my voice tremble, giving the acting performance of a lifetime. "I just wanted to ask if you would drop the case with Child Protective Services. Please, I miss my little Grace so much." The case had actually been thrown out a week ago for lack of evidence, but Madison was cruel enough to let me believe it was still active. "Oh, honey, I guess Child Protective Services did not want your baby either. You are such a pathetic mother. But hey, look on the bright side. Michael and Alexis are getting married next month. You can watch from the service entrance if you want." They all burst into laughter. I could hear Victoria yell, "Tell her we forgot she even exists." Then Alexis added, "And tell her Michael said the last 3 years with her were the worst of his life." Their laughter got louder. "Listen to me, Emma. You were always a nobody. You will always be a nobody. But this was fun. Goodbye." She hung up, and their laughter echoed in my ears. I was sitting in the executive office of Harrington Global. The call had been on speakerphone, so Richard and Crawford heard it all. My face was a cold, emotionless mask. Richard finally spoke. "Was that what you needed?" I simply nodded. "Yes. Release the Madison package now." On April 3rd, at 6 o'clock in the morning, a gossip blog called Elite Secrets published a shocking story. The headline read, "Influencer Madison Sterling, the lies behind the likes." It was a complete demolition, with evidence for every claim. The article showed her real driver's license, which proved she was 32, not 26. It included her medical records, listing every plastic surgery she ever had. Photos showed what she looked like before and after her natural transformation. Bank statements proved her parents paid for 70% of her lifestyle. It even had messages where she lied to brands about her age. The article went viral in under 2 hours. The hashtag Madison Sterling Exposed started trending everywhere. People started zooming in on her photos, looking for signs of surgery. Beauty creators on YouTube made videos called "Madison Sterling Fooled Us All." Then, her brand deals began to disappear. Sephora ended her contract because of false representation. Fashion Nova said in a statement, "We demand honesty from our influencers. Your contract is terminated." Flat Tummy Tea announced their partnership was over right away. 12 other brands dropped her in just 4 hours. At 9 in the morning, Prestige Modeling Agency sent her an email. It was short and brutal. "Dear Madison, your contract is terminated immediately for failing to disclose cosmetic procedures and for age fraud. Return all company items by the end of the day." Of course, Madison had no idea that I was the new owner of the agency. At 11 o'clock, she went live on Instagram, crying her makeup off. "This is not true," she sobbed. "I am 26. I have never had surgery. This is all fake. Someone is trying to ruin my life." The comments flooded her screen. "We saw the driver's license, sweetie. Stop lying." Another one read, "You're a fake. Unfollowing." 47,000 people were watching her meltdown. Her follower count started to drop fast. It went from 486,000 to 450,000, then to 420,000, and kept falling to 380,000. Madison just cried into her phone, pleading, "I do not know who is doing this to me. Please make them stop." Victoria called her. "You have to get off Instagram right now. You are only making it worse," Madison shouted. "Mom, they leaked everything. My private medical files. How is that even legal?" Her mother snapped back. "I do not care about that. Go fix this mess." In just 1 week, Madison's followers fell to 180,000. She lost all her sponsors. Her agency fired her, and her name was a joke. She desperately called Victoria. "Can you get Dad to make this stop?" Victoria's voice was like ice. "Your father has bigger problems to deal with." Sterling Industries was beginning to fall apart, exactly as I had planned. I sat with Richard and watched the news reports. Phase 1 was complete. Madison was no longer a problem. She had called me trash and filmed my assault for her own entertainment. Now she was getting what she deserved. Richard looked over at me. "So, who's the next name on your list?" I answered him. "Alexis. After I am done with her, we will save Victoria and Jonathan for the grand finale in the boardroom." On April 5th, Michael and Alexis were at the Sterling mansion, pretending to be happy. Their wedding was scheduled for May, and Alexis's belly got bigger every day. The fake pregnancy stomach she wore was top of the line and looked completely real. Victoria was busy planning every detail of the wedding, while Jonathan was secretly panicking about the company's money problems. Later that day, a FedEx package with no return address arrived. Michael opened it in his study. Inside, he found a large file for a woman named Alexandra Marie Thompson. It showed her long criminal history, including photos from 3 different arrests and solid proof of her fake pregnancies. The file also contained the very same ultrasound picture she had shown him. With digital proof, she bought it from a website. It even had bank statements revealing she scammed other men out of $650,000. A small note lay on top of the papers. It said, "Michael, you treated me like nothing for 3 years. Now you get to see how it feels to be the fool. I suggest you check her stomach. It's not real. You're welcome. A friend." A furious rage burned through Michael. He stormed into the bedroom where Alexis was getting dressed. He threw the file at her and yelled, "Who are you?" Alexis started to stutter. "Baby, please, I can explain everything," he screamed back. "Your name isn't even Alexis. You're a con artist." She tried to run, but he grabbed her arm. Her sleeve caught on a drawer, and the prosthetic belly slipped out from under her dress. It was made of expensive silicone, but it was clearly fake. It hit the hardwood floor with a sick, heavy thud. Michael just stared at it, his face a mask of total shock. "Get out of my house now," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Just then, Victoria and Jonathan ran in after hearing the commotion. They saw the documents scattered all over the floor. Victoria gasped, covering her mouth. Jonathan bent down and picked up one of the papers. "Oh my God," he whispered. "She's wanted by the police in California." Alexis made a run for her purse, but Jonathan blocked the door. "You are not going anywhere," he said firmly. "I'm calling the authorities." At exactly 11 o'clock that morning, 2 police officers arrived. They had an active warrant from California that was just approved. As they put Alexis in handcuffs, she started screaming, "This is a setup. Someone sent you that file. Someone is targeting this family." Victoria stood there, completely still. Who would know about Madison? She wondered aloud. First her, and now Alexis. Someone is attacking us. Jonathan tried to calm her down. "Victoria, stop being paranoid. It is just a coincidence." But he did not look convinced at all. That evening, Michael sat alone in his dark study with a drink. His whole world was falling apart. The 3-year marriage he was in had been a cruel bet, a story his friends still laughed about. He had a daughter with Emma, a child he had walked away from. He had just learned Alexis was a professional criminal. Worst of all, his family business was about to go under. It felt like every single thing he touched turned to dust. He pulled out his phone and looked up my old number, but it was disconnected. For a moment, he actually considered calling me to apologize. Then Victoria walked in. "Do not you even think about it," she said with a sharp tone. He spoke quietly. "Maybe we were wrong about her and the baby. Grace, she is my daughter, and I—" Victoria slapped him hard across the face. "That girl is not in our lives. She is nothing. You need to focus on what matters now, and that is saving this family's company." Michael stared at his mother, worried. "What if this is all happening because of how we treated Emma?" Victoria just laughed. "Emma? That pathetic little nobody? She is probably gone for good. She has neither the money nor the brains to fight a family like ours." I watched this all unfold on a hidden camera, hearing every word. My face was a mask of cold fury. On April 6th, I continued to watch the Sterling family tear itself apart. Richard said to me, "The Sterlings are doing this to themselves. Michael and Alexis are done. Madison's life is over, and Victoria is terrified. You can end this now. You can take Grace, move to Paris, and just be happy. They have suffered enough." I looked at my daughter, Grace, who was 2.5 months old and smiling at me. "Maybe you are right," I said softly. "Perhaps this revenge is not worth it. They are already ruining their own lives. All I ever wanted was a peaceful life. I wanted Grace to grow up far away from all this anger. I even started planning for us to move to London, where Harrington Global had European offices. I could have run my company from anywhere, far away from them. I would never have to see the Sterlings again, and could let them drown in the mess they created. For a moment, I actually thought about showing them mercy. But then, April 8th happened. A thick envelope arrived at the Harrington Global headquarters. It held court documents. The Sterling family was suing me, Emma Morgan, for emergency custody of my daughter. They claimed I had abandoned Grace. They had phony statements from staff they paid off, all saying I was mentally unstable. They even produced a fake psychiatric report from Dr. Rothman. They argued that the Sterling family offered a stable two-parent home. They said Michael was a changed man who wanted to fix his mistakes. They claimed a child belonged in a rich, secure home, not with a single mother. An emergency hearing was set for April 11th, just 3 days from then. The judge assigned to the case was the Honorable Robert Whitmore of the Connecticut Family Court. Richard looked extremely worried. "Emma, this is very bad," he said. "Judge Whitmore is from an old, wealthy Connecticut family. He golfs with Jonathan Sterling and is known to favor so-called traditional families." I argued back, "But I have my own proof. I have all the records of the assault and their cruelty." Richard just shook his head sadly. "They will claim you got that evidence illegally. If the judge throws it out, it becomes your word against theirs. And in a Connecticut family court, they will always have the advantage." The terrible truth of it all hit me like a punch in the stomach. I had $2.3 billion, but I could still lose my own daughter. Money isn't the final word in family court, especially when the judge is already on the other side. My legal team, 5 of the best lawyers in the country, got together to make a plan. One suggested, "We need Dr. Morrison to testify about the abuse at the hospital." Richard replied, "She is terrified. Testifying means going against the hospital that the Sterlings donate millions to." Another lawyer spoke up, "What about Rebecca Martinez?" Richard sighed heavily. "The nurse. Her testimony is only hearsay. She did not see the attack with her own eyes." Another lawyer added, "Besides, the security video from the mansion was obtained illegally. The court will never allow it." I looked at their faces as my hope began to disappear. "So, we have nothing we can use?" The main lawyer was painfully honest. "We have your testimony, but that they will portray you as an angry and vengeful ex-daughter-in-law. We also know Judge Whitmore is already biased against you." On April 11th, we went to the Connecticut Family Court in New Haven. I walked in with my lawyers. On the other side of the room, the entire Sterling family sat with their 8 attorneys. The Sterling's lead lawyer started his opening speech. "Your Honor, this is about the well-being of a child. Grace Sterling has a loving family. Her father, Michael Sterling, has made mistakes, like all of us. But he is dedicated to being the father she deserves. Her grandparents, Victoria and Jonathan Sterling are respected members of our community. They can give her a wonderful life with their resources and stability." He went on, "The mother, Emma Morgan, has shown very unstable behavior. She left her child with strangers while she was seen at fancy hotels and business meetings. They were twisting my hard work to build Harrington Global into something evil." My lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, this is a clear attempt by an abusive family to harm my client even more. Emma Morgan was attacked and then thrown out of the Sterling home with her newborn in a snowstorm." The other lawyer shouted, "Objection! There is no proof of any attack." The judge answered, "Objection sustained. Counselor, please stick to the facts." Next, they called Victoria to the stand. Dressed in a Chanel suit with pearls, she played the part of the perfect grandmother. Her face was full of fake worry. "Your Honor," she began in a soft, believable voice, "I loved Emma, like my own daughter. We welcomed her into our home, even with her simple background. We did all we could to help her get used to our world. We were so happy when she had the baby. But then, Emma became paranoid and began accusing us of terrible things." She continued her pack of lies. "She said we wanted to steal Grace from her. We were only trying to help." She then said, "She left our house on her own in the middle of the night. We were so scared for her, and now we have no idea where she is or what she is doing. Michael just wants to be a father to his little girl." My lawyer started his cross-examination. "Mrs. Sterling, you say Emma left on her own? Can you tell me why a woman recovering from major surgery would go out into a blizzard with her infant?" Victoria answered smoothly. "I am not sure. Like I said, her mind was not clear." He pushed harder. "Did you or any of your family members ever physically hurt Emma Morgan?" "Never," she said with a straight face. "That is a horrible thing to say." "How about this?" my lawyer asked, trying to show the video from Madison's social media. "Objection!" the Sterling's lawyer yelled. "That video was recorded without permission and has obviously been edited." The judge agreed immediately. "Objection sustained. I will not allow any illegally obtained evidence in my court." After that, Madison gave her testimony. She was clearly coached and much quieter after her recent public humiliation. "Emma never fit in with our family," she said softly. "She was jealous of me and our life. The night she left, she was screaming at my mother and making threats. We tried to calm her down, but she just ran out into the snow. I was afraid for the baby. That is why I recorded it, to show her crazy behavior to child services." Then, Michael gave the performance of a lifetime. "Your Honor," he said, his voice thick with fake sadness, "I made awful mistakes. I was a terrible husband. I ignored Emma. I am so sorry, but I love my daughter. I want to be her dad. I am in therapy now, and I am getting better. My family can give her stability, a good home, and financial security." He looked right at me. "A future with Emma? I do not even have her address. How can she take care of Grace properly?" Then it was my turn to speak. I told the whole truth. I told them about the bet, the constant emotional torment, the attack at the hospital, and how they threw me out into the cold. The Sterling's lawyer tore me to shreds during his cross-examination. "Miss Morgan, you claim there was abuse, but you have zero evidence. There are no police reports, no medical records of this supposed attack, and no witnesses besides your friends, who would of course side with you. Is it not true that you are just a bitter ex-wife trying to keep a good father away from his child?" I said. "No. They pushed me down the stairs. I have a video of it." He jumped on that immediately. "A video you got illegally by hacking into their private security system?" my lawyer shouted. "Objection!" But the judge said, "Overruled. Answer the question, Miss Morgan." I stumbled on my words. An associate, got it for me. "So you are admitting it was obtained by illegal means?" Judge Whitmore spoke before giving his final decision. He said, "This is a very difficult case. My main job is to protect the child's welfare. While I do believe Miss Morgan is a caring mother, the judge said my lack of solid evidence was a serious issue. He said the Sterling family, in contrast, proved they had the means, a stable home, and a real desire to care for Grace." For these reasons, he was giving temporary custody to Michael Sterling and his family. A full 30-day review would come next. He said I would get supervised visits 2 times a week. My whole world just fell apart. No, oh no, please do not do this. They led Grace in from the waiting area. I hugged her with all my might, sobbing uncontrollably. No, please do not take my baby away, please. A social worker gently pried Grace from my embrace. Victoria took my daughter's hand, a smug look covering her face. Grace cried, reaching her arms out for me. I sank to the floor, found completely destroyed. This felt worse than being left to freeze in the snow. This time, I had money, power, and connections. I had every possible advantage, and I still lost. The system had failed me completely. On the steps of the courthouse, cameras flashed from all sides as reporters closed in. Victoria led Grace to the Sterling's car, with Madison walking right beside them. Michael and his family looked triumphant and refused to even glance at me. That night, I was all alone in the huge Harrington Global penthouse, just staring at Grace's empty crib. Finally, I called Richard. I explained that I played by every single rule. I did everything right, but they still won. They have my daughter. He tried to comfort me, saying we could appeal and keep up the fight. But something inside me had changed for good. My voice was not pleading anymore. It was cold as ice. I told him there was no more we, and no more following their rules. I was finished with their game. You told me once that I was in control of the entire board, I said. Well, now I am going to flip the whole board over. I need you to set up the contract meeting. I want every last one of them in that room by April 12th. Richard sounded hesitant. That is tomorrow, he said. Emma, are you absolutely sure about this? I replied instantly. They wanted a war. I am going to give them total annihilation. From midnight until 6 in the morning, Richard and I worked. I called Dr. Morrison and told her I needed her to testify. I swore I would protect her. Crying, she told me how scared she was. I said I was scared too, but that we had to see this through. Crawford, my investigator, found Madison's Instagram live video from the hospital. She had never actually deleted it. The video was still on Instagram's main servers, and we had every legal right to access it. My lawyers filed an emergency motion right away with this new piece of evidence. I did not sleep for a single minute. Instead, I prepared for battle. I chose a crisp white Tom Ford suit and made sure my platinum hair was perfectly styled. I applied a bold red lipstick and stared at my own reflection. It is time to end this, I said to myself. It was April 12th at 2 in the afternoon. The meeting was scheduled at the Harrington Global headquarters on the 52nd floor in Midtown Manhattan. The Sterling family pulled up in a Lexus. Their usual Mercedes was gone, repossessed and replaced by a much older model. They all looked smaller somehow. Jonathan's suit seemed too big for him, showing how much weight he had lost from all the stress. Victoria's jewelry was clearly fake, a cheap imitation of the real diamonds she used to wear. She must have sold the originals for rent money. Madison wore no designer labels. Her hair was a mess, and she looked exhausted. Michael looked hungover and completely defeated, but all of them were trying to put on a brave face. The $75 million contract was their only remaining hope. Inside the elevator, Victoria whispered to her family, "Remember who you are. We are Sterlings. We come from old money, and they will show us respect." She told Jonathan she would do all the talking in the meeting. "We have to win this contract, or we are finished," she said. Madison, looking down at her phone, added, "Well, at least that whole mess with Emma is finished. The judge gave us grace." Michael just stared at the elevator floor without saying a word. The doors opened without a sound on the 52nd floor. The view was breathtaking, with windows from floor to ceiling showing the whole Manhattan skyline. The office was filled with modern art, a quiet display of incredible wealth. A receptionist led them to a conference room with giant glass walls overlooking Central Park. A huge conference table, big enough for 20 people, filled the room. At the very end of the table, the chief executive officer's chair was turned away, facing the city. 8 board members in expensive suits were already seated. Security guards stood near the doors. A massive screen was on the wall behind the main chair. The Sterlings sat down across from the empty head of the table. Jonathan cleared his throat nervously and started, "We want to thank you for this opportunity." My voice cut through the air, stopping him cold. "Hello, Jonathan." The big chair slowly turned around to face them. I was the one sitting there. I looked like a queen with my platinum blonde hair, a stylish white Tom Ford suit, red Louis Vuitton heels, and my grandfather's special ring on my hand. My red lipstick was perfect, and my expression was pure ice. "Hello, Victoria, Madison, and Michael," I said. Their reactions happened in what felt like slow motion. All the color drained from Jonathan's face as he stumbled back into his seat. Victoria actually fainted. Madison grabbed her eyes wide with absolute terror as she looked at me. Madison's jaw dropped, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. Her phone fell from her hand, making a loud clatter on the floor. Michael was completely frozen, his eyes as wide as they could go. He could not make a single sound. The security guards moved to block the doors. Nobody was leaving. Jonathan finally managed to speak. "What is this?" he stammered out. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" I stood up and started to walk slowly around the big table. My voice was calm, but had a very dangerous edge. "Please, have a seat. We are all here to talk about a $75 million contract." Victoria woke up and started screaming. "This is crazy! This cannot be real. You are nothing." I stopped my slow walk and stared directly at her. "I am Chairwoman Emma Catherine Harrington, the Chief Executive Officer of Harrington Global Industries. I am the only heir to my grandfather, William Harrington's $2.3 billion estate." I pointed to the formal portrait of William Harrington on the wall. "And all of you are here because you applied for a contract with my company." Michael finally found his voice. "That is impossible," he said. "How can you be?" I gave them a little smile. "How am I here? Let me tell you all a story." I clicked a button on a remote, and the large screen behind me lit up. The very first image was security footage from February 15th at 3 o'clock in the morning. It showed me being thrown down the stairs of the Sterling mansion. The date and time were clearly visible at the bottom of the screen. Victoria screamed, "Turn that off," I replied. "No. You are going to sit there and watch." The video continued to play. It showed it all. It showed Madison live streaming. It showed me being dragged across the marble, the blood on the floor, and Victoria shouting at me to kneel. It showed the security team taking Grace from me before I was thrown down the steps into the snow, leaving a trail of blood. Then, the doors slammed shut. The entire boardroom was completely silent. Even the board members, who were seeing this for the first time, looked sickened. I spoke again. "February 15th, 3 o'clock in the morning, you threw me down those steps. At that moment, I was just as you said, a nobody with no money and no power." The next thing on the screen was the death certificate for William James Harrington. The date he died was February 15th at 7 in the morning, just 4 hours later. My grandfather had a massive heart attack right after he watched the security footage of what you did to me. His will named me as his only heir, and it took effect the moment that he died. I paused to let that sink in. "So, do you see now? When you threw me out at 3 in the morning, I was penniless. But by the time 7 in the morning arrived, I was in the process of becoming a billionaire. You just did not know it yet." Victoria whispered, "Oh my God." I continued, "That makes for a pretty great headline, does it not? In-laws and mistress throw new billionaire heiress out into the snow, unaware of her fortune. Now let us move on to your current problems." The next slide showed Jonathan Sterling's financial statements covered in red ink. Sterling Industries is $83 million in debt. Well, not quite 83 million anymore. 3 weeks ago, I bought 75 million of that debt from your bankers for a very good price. I am calling in that debt today. You have 48 hours to pay me in full, or I will take every single one of your assets. Jonathan's mouth hung open, but nothing came out. "Oh, and one more thing," I added. The logo for the Federal Bureau of Investigation appeared on the screen, followed by emails proving Jonathan stole from the company pension fund. The Federal Bureau of Investigation received copies of these records at 9 this morning. You can expect to see formal charges by the end of the week. The next slide showed Victoria Sterling's stores, Sterling-style boutiques. All 5 of your shops are in buildings that I now own. Your leases are canceled, effective right now. The locks will be changed by 5 o'clock this evening. You also have a past due balance of $480,000 in rent you never paid. I am suing you for that amount, plus damages. And one last thing. The logo for the Internal Revenue Service filled the screen. The IRS was informed about $2.3 million in tax fraud just yesterday. You should prepare for a complete audit. A picture of Madison wearing my mother's necklace appeared next, and I am filing a personal lawsuit against you for $5 million for the theft of my mother's heirloom jewelry. Victoria gasped and grabbed at her chest. The next slide was all about Madison Sterling. It showed the before and after pictures from her recent public disaster. Your modeling career is over, I said. Your social media influence is gone. But this next part is my personal favorite. A video started to play. It was Madison's live video from the hospital. It was the entire, unedited recording of her showing my abuse to everyone. This was witnessed by 500,000 people. It is now considered admissible evidence in a court of law. The Greenwich Police Department was sent this video footage this morning. Charges of assault have been officially brought against you. Madison immediately burst into tears. Next up, Michael Sterling. The entire video of the college bet was played on the large screen. Every cruel word, every single laugh, and every terrible thing he said about me was displayed for the whole world to see. This video is being sent to every major news station at 6 o'clock this evening. Your theft of $3.8 million from Sterling Industries has also been turned over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But this next part is what will hurt you the most. The final slide was about the emergency custody hearing for Grace. New footage suddenly appeared on the screen. It was a recording from Dr. Morrison's own phone at the hospital, with crystal clear audio of the threats and the assault. After that, Madison's Instagram live stream was played again, which is now considered a public record for the court. This was followed by a sworn statement from 3 former employees of the Sterling estate, whom I paid to come forward and tell the whole truth. An emergency motion was filed with the family court first thing this morning. At the Connecticut Family Court, a new judge was looking at my case, and our hearing was the next morning. "You will never see Grace again," Michael yelled, as he tried to leap at me over the large conference table. "You witch! You have ruined everything!" Before he could reach me, security guards tackled him and pinned him to the floor. I did not even blink. As Michael fought, he screamed, "You destroyed my life! We gave you everything!" I moved very close, and my voice was a quiet whisper that only he could hear. "You never gave me anything. Our entire marriage was a lie, just a bet for you and your friends. You just stood by as your family hurt me for 3 long years. You abandoned your own daughter when she was just 3 days old. I did not destroy your life, Michael. You did all of this to yourself." Victoria fell to her knees and started begging me. "Please, please, we can work this out. We will give you anything you want. I will apologize." I looked down at her. "You do not own a single thing I could ever want." I stepped closer and looked directly into her eyes. "You called me trash. You told me I was a nobody. You told me I belonged out in the snow. But I have to tell you, trash does not build a $2.3 billion company. Trash does not destroy powerful families." "You did not throw away trash, Victoria," I said, leaning in closer. "You threw away a queen." Jonathan, looking utterly defeated, made one last attempt. "The contract, please. We need the contract." I slowly shook my head. "There is no contract. There never was a contract. This was not a business meeting. This was to show you exactly who you tried to ruin, and who is ruining you now." I picked up the remote control again. "Oh, and there is one more thing." The large screen on the wall came to life with a live YouTube video. The viewer count showed 4.2 million people were watching. This entire meeting has been broadcast live. 4.2 million people just heard our whole conversation. The chat on the screen was flying by with messages. Wow, she is an absolute queen. They are getting exactly what they deserve. This is the best revenge story. Emma Harrington is my new hero. Madison's voice was a scream of pure terror. You cannot do this. It is illegal. We did not agree to be filmed. You should have read the non-disclosure agreement you signed when you arrived, I said, that yet in a calm voice. Clause 47 covers media consent for business meetings. I handed Victoria the paper, the one she had signed without even a glance. You did not read it, did you? I actually learned that from you. Always read what you sign. It was a pointed reminder of the day they made me sign divorce papers in the hospital. Security guards then escorted them from the room, and they were not gentle. Victoria was dragged away, shouting, "You will be sorry for this. We will sue you." I just replied, "Sue me with what money? You have nothing left. Goodbye, Victoria." Madison was crying uncontrollably. "I am so sorry. Please, I am so sorry." I looked right at her. "You filmed me during my worst moment for your own amusement. You wanted me to be a joke on the internet. Well, congratulations. Now you are going viral too." Michael's eyes met mine one last time. "Emma, please, think about Grace. She is my daughter." "No," I said firmly. "She is my daughter. You are just the man who helped create her and then abandoned her. You will not see her again." The guards then pulled him from the room. Jonathan just walked away in total silence, a defeated and broken man. His family's entire legacy had been destroyed. For a moment, I was alone in the huge boardroom, just looking at the New York City skyline. My colleague Richard came in. "The stream is still on, 5.8 million viewers, and the number is still rising." I simply nodded. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Morrison. "We have an emergency custody hearing tomorrow. With this new evidence, we will absolutely win. Grace is finally coming home." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a real, genuine smile spread across my face. Outside the Harrington Global building, the Sterling family walked into total chaos. 50 reporters were there. The flash of cameras was blinding as they shouted their questions. "Is it true you left a newborn baby in the snow? Did you really marry her as part of a bet? Are you going to be arrested?" Just then, agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation walked toward them. "Jonathan Sterling? Michael Sterling? You are under arrest for embezzlement and wire fraud." They were immediately handcuffed as the agents read them their rights. Victoria and Madison were not handcuffed, but the press swarmed them. Madison's phone was buzzing endlessly with hateful messages from strangers. Victoria desperately tried to hide her face from all the cameras. On social media, our story became a worldwide event. Sterling Family Exposed was trending at number 1, Emma Harrington was number 2, and $1 Billion Revenge was ranked 3rd. The very next day, we had the custody hearing. With the doctor's statement, the hospital recording, and Madison's own live stream, the judge's decision was fast. I was granted full and sole custody. The Sterlings received 0 visitation rights, while their criminal charges were unresolved. When they finally placed Grace into my arms, I held her close and cried. She was safe. At last, she was completely safe. 6 months later, on October 15th, I was on the cover of Forbes magazine. The headline said, "Emma Harrington, the CEO who came from nothing." The stock for Harrington Global had gone up by 40%, and we had opened up in 3 new markets. I was in my office, watching my 8-month-old daughter, Grace, play on a small mat by my desk. Rebecca came in and said, "You actually did it." I smiled and answered, "No, we did it together." The long chapter of the Sterling family was finally closed. Jonathan was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for his crimes. Victoria got house arrest, lost all her money, and now works in a department store to pay off massive tax debts from a tiny studio apartment. Madison avoided jail, but her career was completely over. She now works in a call center, and her Instagram followers dropped to just 12,000, a 97% loss. Michael took a plea deal and got a 7-year prison term. He also officially signed away all his parental rights to Grace. As for Alexis, whose real name was Alexandra Thompson, she was convicted in California for fraud and received 15 years in prison. People sometimes ask me if I regret anything, or if getting justice was really worth all the trouble. I just look over at Grace, so happy and healthy, growing up feeling completely safe and loved. I think of the $50 million I donated to help women's shelters and services for abuse survivors. I remember all the women who shared their own stories with me about their survival and how they found their own strength. The video of what they did to me now has 127 million views. The Sterling family name is now a worldwide lesson in karma and justice. Their awful deeds were exposed for everyone to see. So, was it worth it? It was worth every single moment. Let me tell you something important. I learned a lesson I wish I had known when I was lying in the snow, feeling worthless. Pain does not have to destroy you. In fact, if you refuse to quit, pain can shape you into something stronger than a diamond, something that cannot be broken. When they pushed me down those steps, I was bleeding and broken, certain that I was nothing. But I was so wrong. I was not nothing. I was just someone who had not yet discovered her own strength. For weeks, the media attention from the live stream was overwhelming. I could not go anywhere without being recognized. Some people treated me like a hero. Others said I was just being vengeful, that my choices were wrong, and that I should have just been the bigger person. To those people, I have a simple question. What would you have done? Would you have forgiven them after they left your infant daughter to freeze in a blizzard? Would you have let it go after they used a corrupt legal system to try and steal your baby? Would you have shown any mercy to people who showed you absolutely none? I did not think so. There's a very big difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is about making sure they can never hurt anyone again. I was fighting for justice. The Sterling family had a long and cruel history that did not begin with me. After my story became public, 7 other women came forward to share what the Sterlings had done to them. These were all women Michael had been with before me. Women at Sterling Industries had been hurt and then paid to keep quiet. Each one of them thanked me for having the courage to talk about their hidden suffering. In that moment, I knew without a doubt that I had done the right thing. I founded the Harrington Foundation for Abuse Survivors, launching it with $50 million. We offer legal aid, therapy, safe housing, and job training for those escaping abuse. In only 6 months, we have already assisted more than 2,000 people. My daughter Grace will grow up knowing that if someone tries to tear you down, you have 2 options. You can believe what they say, or you can show them just how wrong they are. I chose to prove them wrong. A year later, on April 12th, the anniversary of the boardroom confrontation, I called a press conference. The room was packed with reporters, and camera flashes were going off everywhere. I told them, 1 year ago today, I faced the people who tormented me for 3 years, the ones who left my baby in a blizzard and tried to steal my daughter. Today, I stand before you as a chief executive officer, a devoted mother, and a woman who refused to let cruelty write her story. People often ask me if I have regrets, or if getting even was worth it. Let me be very clear. My goal was never revenge. It was about accountability. The Sterling family did not lose their fortune because I wanted payback. They lost everything because they broke the law. Jonathan Sterling stole from his own employees' retirement funds. Victoria Sterling dodged, paying millions of dollars in taxes. Michael Sterling was guilty of enormous financial fraud, and Madison Sterling assaulted me, then broadcast it live to 500,000 people. I did not destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I just made sure the world had a front row seat. For anyone listening who feels lost in their own personal storm, who is facing total despair, please listen to me. You are not worthless. You are not invisible. You are not the awful thing someone called you just to crush your spirit. You have power. You have value. You are enough. Stand up, brush yourself off, and show them precisely who you are. The whole room burst into applause. After the press conference, I returned to my penthouse apartment. My daughter, Grace, was there with her nanny, playing with blocks on the carpet. As soon as she saw me, her face brightened, and she held out her little arms for me. I scooped her up in a hug, taking in her sweet, wonderful baby smell. I whispered to her, "You know what, my sweet girl? Your mommy was almost broken, but she stood back up. One day, when you are old enough, I will share the story with you. I will teach you that no matter what anybody says, you are the only one who defines you." Grace just giggled and twisted her tiny hand in my hair. I laughed, and for the first time in a long while, it sounded real and truly happy. Rebecca came by later that evening. We sat together on my balcony, sipping wine and looking at the incredible Manhattan skyline. She asked quietly, "Do you ever think about that night, the one in the snow?" "Every single day," I admitted, "but maybe not how you would expect. I do not remember it with pain anymore. For me, it was the moment that changed my whole life. It was when I decided to be a survivor, not a victim." "You are incredible. You know that?" she said. I just shook my head. "I am not special. I am just a woman who refused to be defeated." "That," she said with a smile, "is exactly what makes you so special." We sat for a while in comfortable silence, watching the city lights start to glow. "So, what is next for you?" Rebecca asked. I considered her question for a moment. "Honestly, I am not certain. I will continue to grow the company, help people through the foundation, and raise Grace to be a strong and kind person. Perhaps that is enough." "That is more than enough," she answered. "You have already changed the world for so many people." Later that night, long after Rebecca had left, I stood in Grace's nursery, just watching her sleep. She looked so calm, so perfectly innocent and pure. My thoughts turned to my mother, Catherine, and how she escaped her own controlling father. She was so determined to build her own life. I recalled how she worked 3 jobs just to provide for me, too proud to ever ask for help, even when it was hard. Then I thought about my grandfather, William, who watched me suffer for 2 long years. He wanted to step in, but was held back by lawyers and their complicated plans. I know how much it pained him to see someone he loved hurting so badly. In the end, their pride held them both back. It was a wall built between their love and their stubbornness. That is a mistake I will never make. I promise you this, I whispered to my sleeping baby. You will always know, deep in your heart, how much you are loved. You will learn that asking for help is not a weakness, but a sign of great strength. You will understand that you should never tolerate cruelty from anyone, no matter who they are. And if anyone ever dares to make you feel small, you will remember your mother was left in the snow, but she came back a queen. Grace shifted in her sleep, her hand balling into a tiny fist. I smiled and kissed her forehead gently. A board meeting was set for tomorrow. My company, Harrington Global, is launching a new division next week. It will focus on ethical work and employee wellness. Next month, my foundation will open 3 new shelters. But tonight, I was not a chief executive officer. I was just Emma, a mom watching her little girl sleep. I was a woman who survived something terrible and came out stronger. That victory felt like it was more than enough. 5 years have passed. Today is Grace's first day of kindergarten. She is in a purple dress she picked out herself. Her dark hair is in 2 ponytails that bounce when she moves. "Mommy, will the other kids like me?" she asked on the way to school. "Sweetheart, they will absolutely love you. Just be yourself. That is always enough." "Just like you always say," she said back. Exactly what I always say. I watched her run to the school doors, so brave and full of life. My heart swelled with so much pride. Harrington Global is now worth $4.1 billion. We have moved into renewable energy, ethical manufacturing, and affordable housing. Every choice I make is guided by one question: what world do I want for Grace? The Harrington Foundation has helped over 15,000 people escape violent homes. We funded 3 documentaries to raise awareness about domestic violence. We also fought for stronger laws to protect survivors in family court. The Sterling family feels like a bad dream from another life. Jonathan got out of prison last month after serving his full term. He is 67 years old and works at a hardware store. I heard he applied for a job at my company once. He was rejected. Victoria is 73. She is still stuck in her house and works in retail. She will spend the rest of her life paying her financial debts to the government. Madison is 42, a fact she would hate for me to share. She works the night shift at a 24-hour diner. She has no online profile, no fans, and no fame. She lives a completely ordinary life, which I am sure is her greatest punishment. Michael was released from prison 2 months ago. He served 5 years of a 7-year sentence. He tried to contact me once to ask about visiting his daughter. My lawyer sent him a cease and desist letter in response. He gave up all his parental rights. He has no legal tie to her. I hear he manages a warehouse in New Jersey and is engaged. For his new fiance's sake, I hope he has changed, but I doubt it. Alexis is still in prison with 7 more years to go. As for me, I am now engaged. His name is David Collins, a civil rights lawyer. We met at a fundraiser for my foundation. He knows everything about my past, and he loves me anyway. Most importantly, he loves Grace like she is his own. After I told him everything about the Sterling family, he looked at me and said, "Do you know what I see? I do not see a victim. I do not even see a survivor. I see a woman who refused to let the cruelty of others ruin her life. I see pure strength." In that moment, I knew my heart was safe with him. Our wedding is planned for this spring. It will be a small, simple ceremony with just close family and friends. Grace is excited to be the flower girl and has already picked her dress. Some nights, I still dream of the snow. I dream of the biting cold and Grace's cries fading away. I dream of the certainty that we were both going to die. But I do not wake up scared anymore. I just get up, walk to Grace's room, and watch her sleep. I remind myself that we made it. We did more than survive. We built a beautiful life. Last week, a young woman visited my office. She found me through the foundation. Her in-laws had abused her and thrown her out with nothing, just like they did to me. "I read your story," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "When I saw what you did, I thought, if she can do it, maybe I can too." I took her hand in mine. "You absolutely can," I told her, "and you will not have to do it alone." We found her a spot in one of our shelters and got her a lawyer. We also set up counseling and helped her file a police report. 2 months later, she sent me a photograph. It was her and her 2 children, all smiling outside their new apartment. The note simply said, "We are free now. Thank you for showing me it was possible. This is why I did it all. It was never about getting even. It was for her and for that moment. It was for every person who needed to see that you can be left to die in the snow and still rise to build an empire." Today is April 12th. It is the anniversary of that final boardroom fight. Every year on this day, I try to do something important. This year, I am speaking at a TEDx event about trauma, resilience, and justice. I am on a stage in front of 5,000 people. When they threw me out into the snow, I begin, I was sure my life was finished. I was sure that I was worthless. A part of me felt I deserved it. I was wrong about everything. Pain does not have to break you. Sometimes, if you fight hard enough, if you refuse to quit, pain will build you into something stronger than you ever thought you could be. I am not special. I do not have superpowers. I am just a woman who refused to be broken. For everyone listening who is stuck in your own storm, in your own hard time, this is not the end of your story. This is the beginning. Get up, brush off the snow, and show the world who you are. Because worthless people do not build empires. Worthless people do not change the world. Worthless people do not inspire thousands to find their own strength. You are not worthless. You are not a nobody. You have more power than you can imagine. And one day, you will look back on this moment and know that it was when you became unbreakable. The crowd gets to their feet, clapping for 3 whole minutes. Afterward, hundreds of people wait in line to speak with me, to share their own stories of survival, to say thank you. They tell me they are getting back up too. That night, I am home with Grace and David. We are making a simple pasta dinner, Grace's favorite. Mommy, why do so many people want to talk to you? Grace asks, stirring the tomato sauce. Because Mommy's story helps them understand something important, I say. What is that? That no matter what happens in life, you get to decide what it means. You get to decide who you become. Like how you became a queen? Her question makes me laugh. Something just like that, sweetheart. David kisses the side of my head. The queen who came from the snow, he whispers. I like the sound of that, I say. Later that evening, after Grace is tucked in bed, David and I sit on the balcony, just as my friend Rebecca and I did years ago. Do you ever regret it? He asks, making it all so public. The live stream, the news, everything. I think about his question for a moment. Honestly, I do not, I reply, because it was never about me. It was for every person who was ever made to feel like they were nothing. It was for everyone who has ever been thrown away like trash. I needed them to see that you can come back from that. You can do more than survive. You can thrive. He tells me, you have changed so many lives. I simply shake my head. They are the ones who changed their own lives. I only showed them it was possible. We sit in silence, holding hands and watching the city lights. I think about the Emma from 5 years ago, hurt and bleeding, absolutely certain she would die in the snow. If I could go back in time and speak to her, I would say, just hold on a little longer. Help is on the way. 5 years from now, you will be happy, genuinely and completely happy. Grace will be a healthy and happy little girl. You will be in a loving relationship with a wonderful man. You will have helped thousands of people find safety. And the Sterling family will just be a distant, bad memory. The winter cannot last forever. Spring always comes. My phone buzzes on the table. It is a new message from the foundation. Another woman is reaching out for help. Another person ready to escape her own storm. I reply to her message right away. I connect her with our support team and promise her that she is not alone. Because that is what this is all about. It was never about payback. It was not even really about justice. It was about making sure no one ever has to lie in the snow again, hurt and broken, believing they are worthless. It was about showing everyone that you can be discarded like trash and still build a kingdom. If my own story of pain and perseverance can inspire even one person to fight back, then every single tear was worth it. As I look out over the New York City skyline, my eyes land on the Harrington Global building. That tower is my grandfather's legacy, a silent guardian over the city I now call home. I can almost sense my grandfather, William, watching over me from somewhere beyond. I hope with all my heart that he is proud. I think about my mother, Catherine, who taught me that true courage means walking away from what hurts you. I see my precious Grace, safe in her bed, wrapped in so much love that she will never have to question her worth. And then, my thoughts return to me. Emma Catherine Morgan Harrington. I was once the girl no one ever noticed, but I became the woman who had everything. They cast me out in a blizzard with nothing to my name. They had no idea I was the rightful heir to a billion-dollar legacy. They never thought I would survive that night. They surely never dreamed I would return stronger than ever. But their biggest mistake was not knowing that when you shatter a person, you can accidentally forge them into something unbreakable. I refuse to be a victim. I am more than a survivor. I am a woman who was broken into a million pieces and chose to rebuild herself. I am a mother who will make certain her daughter knows that her value comes only from within. I am the chief executive officer of a business empire founded on integrity and kindness. I am a benefactor who turns past suffering into a reason to lift others up. I am the queen who came back from the cold. So, if you are hearing my voice right now, if you feel lost in your own winter, if you have ever been made to feel small, I need you to hear this truth. You are not insignificant. You matter. There is an incredible strength waiting inside you. You are destined for great things, and your moment is coming. Be proud of who you are. The snow always melts. Your new beginning is just ahead. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own power, please hit the like button and pass it on to someone who needs to hear this today. Share a story in the comments about a time you refused to give up. For more inspiring stories of hope, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a video. Remember, you are not worthless. You are not invisible. You are more powerful than you could ever imagine. Our team poured their hearts into researching, writing, and perfecting this content. Our goal is to share life's important lessons and bring inspiration directly to you. We create each story with a powerful purpose because we know the right message at the right moment can change a life forever. Thank you for joining us on this meaningful journey.